John Lansky here of Lansky Archery Adventures. Serious testing, successful hunting. Today I want to talk about broadhead sharpness. Sharpness matters. You don't think it matters? Take this butter knife and take this hunting knife. Okay, if I were to take this butter knife and chop away on my arm or poke away on my arm or slice away on my arm, there's no problem, no damage caused. If I did that same thing with this hunting knife, even if I did it as lightly as I possibly could, there'd be blood all over the floor. Sharpness matters. Well, in a broadhead application, sharpness definitely matters. The goal of a broadhead is to be as lethal as possible. The sharper a broadhead is, the more effectively it's going to accomplish that purpose. Think of it this way. The sharper the broadhead, the deeper it's going to penetrate. There's less friction, it's going to penetrate deeper, all other things equal. And also, the sharper the broadhead, the cleaner it's going to cut. A clean cut produces more bloodletting than a jagged cut. A jagged cut can close up more readily than a clean cut. Also, the sharper the broadhead, the more likely it is to cut through veins, whereas a dull broadhead can often cause the vein to bend over and roll over the vein, slide over the vein, rather than cut through it. So there's less bloodletting in a dull broadhead, more bloodletting in a sharp broadhead. Sharpness matters. But as we talk about sharpness in broadheads, there's two different areas that are really important to understand. The first is the initial edge. That's the edge out of the package, or the edge after you sharpened it, before it goes into the animal at all. That's really important. That's the first thing that's going to penetrate that animal. I'm going to talk about that in a bit and spend a chunk of time talking about how to help your broadheads get that initial edge, get as sharp as they possibly can. And I'm going to go through a bunch of tips and techniques on how to sharpen broadheads. But before I do that, there's something that's even more important to understand, and that is retained edge. See, there's the initial edge, then there's the retained edge. The retained edge is the edge retention. After that broadhead has gone in and out of a quiver a few times, after it's gone into the hide, cut through the hide of an animal, cut through tissue, maybe cut through bone, well, how sharp is it at that point? How sharp is it as it cuts through the animal? How well it retains its edge makes that difference. The sharper it is, the deeper it's going to penetrate. The sharper it is, the cleaner it's going to cut. The sharper it is, the more effectively it's going to cut through those veins rather than causing them to bend over. And the greater the bloodletting, the greater the lethality of that broadhead. So the edge retention is even more important than that initial edge. The initial edge can be great, and then boom, it goes into the hide. And if it loses that and doesn't retain its edge, it's not going to be nearly as lethal as a head that does retain that edge. That's why in all of my broadhead tests, I do an edge retention test. I like to test it in a really tough way through a 22 gauge steel plate. I figure if that head can retain its edge as it passes multiple times through a 22 gauge steel plate, then man, it's going to do really well through an animal. Many people comment when I do these tests like, well, the last time I looked at an animal, it didn't have a steel plate, or I don't know any steel armored animals. And you make jokes like, I don't hunt steel plate. Okay, yeah, really funny. Like I've never heard that before. I understand that. But I want a head, and you should want a head that keeps its edge all the way through an animal. And if you can buy a head, especially within the same price range, within your price point, that can hold its edge through steel plate, why would you choose one that can't when you can choose one that can? Wouldn't you want to select the one that can hold its edge even through steel plate? Imagine how much more effectively it's going to hold its edge and be lethal when it shoots through an animal. So, how do you control edge retention? It's in the broadhead you select, the broadhead you buy. How do you control initial edge? That's in the way you sharpen. And that's what I'm going to spend a little bit of time on to help you understand how to get that edge initially as sharp as it can possibly be. And this is important not only to improve upon out-of-the-box sharpness, but also to resharpen a head after it's been shot into a foam target, or after it's been put into your quiver several times. It loses its edge. Or after it's gone through an animal. How do you bring it back to its premium level of sharpness? I've zoomed way in here so you can see the broadheads close up. And what I've got here is an array of the basic Broadhead designs. Okay, this pretty much covers the basic heads. Now I know there's many other heads that are made that are very unique and don't follow these basic designs. In that case, the manufacturer will usually create some sort of a specialized tool to sharpen their broadheads, and they'll sell those on their website. But these are the basic models that you're going to run into, and it's really important to understand the type of bevel, the type of head, the type of edge that you have in order to sharpen it in the most effective way. And we're going to go through these, and I'm going to sharpen all of these using various tools and systems to show you all the different ways that you can get it done, from expensive systems to just stuff you have around the house. Okay, so it'll be kind of fun. But you've got the two-blade single bevels here, you got two-blade double bevels here, you got a two-blade double bevel that's got curved edges. You've got a two-blade double bevel that has multiple edges. And then you've got a three-blade that's one piece. Another annihilator three-blade that's one piece. And then you've got a three-blade that's got replaceable blades. And then you've got four-blade with bleeders. Okay, another four-blade with bleeders there. This is a four-blade with bleeders that has multiple edges like that other one that I looked at. Here's a four-blade with bleeders that has curved edges. Okay, the curved edges are more difficult to sharpen. Honestly, I tend to stay away from the curved edges for that specific reason. You can do it, but it's not as easy as a straight edge. And then here you've got a four-blade where there's not bleeders, but all four of the blades are replaceable. And then here you've got a four-blade that's one-piece construction. So like the three-blade one-piece, but here's a four-blade that's one piece. And then here you've got a couple mechanical heads, which you sharpen just exactly in the same way as you would the fixed blade that has a similar blade, whether double bevel or single bevel. Okay, so now let's get into the different strategies on how to most effectively sharpen these basic different types of heads. And the way I start is I like to start by taking a Sharpie, and I'll take a head here. Okay, let's take the bishop, and I'll just mark up the bevel. Okay, and the bevel is usually like shiny if the rest of it is black. Sometimes, you know, it's all silver, but you can see the bevel is where the angle goes into the edge. Okay, and I'll just sharpen it, and you can do that all the way around. Your goal, no matter what process you use to sharpen it, your goal is to remove that black Sharpie from the broadhead, okay? That's your overall goal. And by removing it, it'll help you to see that you've stuck to the bevel angle, because you want to keep the angle of the bevel the same as it is from the manufacturer. That will produce the most effective and sharpest broadhead, okay? So I'm going to go through a few different systems that I use. One is the Lansky. Okay, the Lansky is a pretty elaborate system here, but it's a good one. And this one allows you to change the bevel angle from 30 degrees to 25 to 20 to 17 based on where you slide this stone in. So you have different grits of stone, and you can choose those. Say for this Exodus head, okay, I took a replaceable blade from an Exodus and I loaded it in here, clamped it down, and then you just take it and you just slide it back and forth over that head. And whatever you do on one side, you want to do exactly the same on the other side. So if I do this 5 times on this side, I want to flip it over and do it 5 times on the other side. And what I do is I will do it like that. I'll do 5 and then 5 and then I'll feel it. 5 and 5 and then I'll feel it. And the way I like to feel it is I just do it into my nail, into my thumbnail, and I push a little bit. And if it bites, like if I can't slide the broadhead across my thumbnail, then I'm feeling pretty good about it. Okay, I want it to bite nail. So there's the Lansky. It's a very elaborate system, not too expensive, but more expensive than some others. Okay, here's another one that I like to use, and this is the DMT. And DMT makes a lot of different models. I love these little foldable models because you can throw them in the backpack. They're really light. You can use them at home. You can use them in the field. And these come with 2 different grits on each one. So like, for example, this one has the black grit on this side. That's for like if it's a really coarse grit for sharpening something that's been really jacked up. And then after it gets a little sharper on that, then you go to the blue grit. Okay, that's a little bit less coarse. It'll get it sharper. And then you move on to the red grit. And the red can take it even sharper. Then more fine, you go to the green grit. And then the most fine of all, you go to this tan grit. So I have all of them. You don't really need all of them, but these are a great tool. And the way you use those is, say you take this bishop head that I had. These are the easiest blades, easiest heads in the world to sharpen. You just slide it across the edge of the stone. And you do that the same number of times on each side. The way I like to do it is I do 10 on one side, and then I do 10, and then rotate it again, and then 10. And I'm not putting any pressure. I'm just basically guiding this head across the stone. And then I'll do it 9 times on each side, okay? I'm not doing all 9 for time's sake, okay? And do it like that 3 times, okay, for 3 edges. And then I'll do 8, and then I'll do 7, and I go all the way down to 1. And by the end of that, whether I'm using the fine or a little bit more coarse, it doesn't matter. It's gonna be really, really sharp. So if you can see the broadhead here, that Sharpie that I drew, it's already gone, because the bevel lined up perfectly on this. They're really good heads, super easy to sharpen. The same is true for the Annihilator. It's another thing that's great about the Annihilator. Now, the next is if you have a double bevel 2-blade, like the Extract here, okay, cool head made out of Australia, and you take a blade like, or you take a stone like this, you just, again, you can just color on it, okay, you try to get the exact angle by just coloring it. And then you try to find it, and if it's a thick broadhead, you can feel it. If it's not super thick, you can't really feel it, but you just slide. And the direction doesn't really matter. I like to slide away like that, and I'll go like 5 strokes like that, and then look and see, okay, how am I doing? Okay, pretty good. I'm hitting the angle pretty good. And then let's turn it over. And again, 5 on the other side. And I would typically use a Sharpie on all the sides to make sure that I'm hitting the right angle. If you're not getting the Sharpie off, then you're not hitting the right angle. Just try it again. And so then I go back to the one with the Sharpie, 5, and you just keep doing that, and then you do it on the other blades as well. So you just do 5, 5, 5, 5, and keep doing that until it's really sharp and it doesn't slide across your nail. So you can do that with double bevel like the Extract. Here's a double bevel, the Alien. I like these heads a lot. Okay, the Alien heads. Now you notice they have a few different blade angles there. That makes it a little more challenging to sharpen. You've got the back edge, you've got this edge, and then you've got this edge. What that means is you have to do this process 3 times on each side. Now, honestly, I don't sharpen the back edge because it doesn't get much pressure on it, and it doesn't really need to be that sharp in the first place, though these are really sharp. So I'll just use the Sharpie, same way I did on that other double bevel, draw it there, and then I'll start with one side, one edge, and I'll do the same thing. I'll try to get that angle, make sure I'm getting the right angle, then I'll do it on this one, and then I'll do it on this side and this side, and you do that here, 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 until it's really sharp and it's biting into. Okay, then you've got the Exodus here. Now with the Exodus, a replaceable blade, three blade, the cool thing is you can just replace the blades, but the Exodus has some of the thickest blades there are of any replaceable blades. These are 0.040 inches thick, so I find I can resharpen them really well, and I can do it even without taking the broadhead off. To do that, I can use a tool like this little Lansky pull-through broadhead sharpener, and there's many like this on the market. I like the Lansky one, and so then I'll just line it up like this, and you just pull it through. And it may not be the exact bevel, but you just pull it through about 10 times on each blade, and it's good enough. and you do it until it's really sharp. That'll even get out some big nicks. Now, if there's a big enough nick that won't get it out, then I'll take the broadhead apart, like I did when I put that blade into that other one. And you can use a system like that, or you can use this again. And it's kind of hard to hold. You can sometimes use needle nose pliers to hold it, but you just slide it across. You mark it with the Sharpie, slide it across, and you get those little marks out. If you had like a big dent, then I'd go with a really coarse one, like this black one. So you can sharpen each blade like that, or just sharpen the blade while it's even on the arrow by using a pull through. Another technique that I like to use sometimes is I use a thinner file sharpener like this. This is made by Spyderco, and you can get into small spaces this way a little bit more readily. So while this Exodus is on my arrow, I can get in there and I try to line up the bevel. Okay, you'd use a Sharpie again, and then you can just sharpen it like that and get in there. And you can get in and do that with all the different blades. Okay, then you've got a single bevel. Single bevels are also really easy to sharpen, are the one-piece double bevels. And the thicker they are, the easier they are to sharpen. You look at this one, it's as thick as it gets. This is a 600 grain broadhead, okay? This is like for serious, dangerous game. And so it's easy to find that bevel because it just lays flat on it. And you just slide it across. And again, you do that 10 times on each side, and then 9, and you do that, 8, 7, go all the way down to 1 on each side, and you only have to do that twice, right? You just do it on each of the bevels. Now you can, after you've done that, sometimes you get a little bit of a burr that's occurred on a single bevel. It's kind of a little bit of a rollover on the opposite side. So you can take it at the end of that and ever so carefully lay it flat and just slide and get that burr off on the other side. You're not sharpening the other side per se, you're just rubbing off that burr that's hanging over the edge. And so that head is going to be super sharp. Okay, same thing on a smaller one. This is a Bishop Scientific Method, the 125 grain. Same thing. You can feel that single bevel. You just slide it, 10, 10, 9, 9. Keep doing that, just like the bigger one there, and that's going to get super sharp. Okay, then if you go to a 4-blade. Now this is an interesting one with the Magnus. The Magnus serraser, or the buzz cut, they have these serrations right here, but you sharpen them in just the same way. So the same way, you just lay it across and sharpen it the same way. You can find that edge. Now, you can't do it with this, okay? You can't do it with a pull through because it's going to get caught in those serrations. But you can on a flat edge like that or a flat edge like this, okay? And then you can do that with, like, say, an iron will. It's the same thing. It's similar to the Alien, that it has multiple edges, okay, 3 on each side. Again, I don't worry about sharpening the back edge, but you'll do the same process for sharpening each of these. You can use these, you can use these. In a bind, you can use these, you can use this. In a bind, you can use a pull through, but it's not my favorite. When I'm using like a really premium head like this, I hate to kind of use just a cheap cheat to sharpen it, but you can. You just make sure that it's really sharp after that, okay? Now, some other things you can do. If you want to get really creative and do some more exciting things, you can use a leather strop. Okay, so here you've got leather. Okay, this is a wooden paddle, and it has a strip of leather on each side. And the reason it has 2 is you use a different sharpening compound on each side. This one, the black, is for more coarse needs, and the green is for a little less coarse needs. So you can take a broadhead, like, let's take this iron will, and you line it up, okay, get that edge just right, and then you just pull it across, just like you would on a flat stone. But this is way more fine. And then again, you want to do the same thing on the other side, okay? Now with leather, you don't want to push into it because you'll cut into the leather. You want to pull back on it like that. But the leather and those compounds really, really hone a super sharp edge. I love using this as a finishing touch to my broadheads. Another way you can do it is you can take a piece of cardboard, literally a piece of cardboard, and you rub this rubbing compound, the sharpening compound. You can buy this online anywhere, the sharpening compound. This is a Bark River model, but you rub it on there and you can do the same thing. You can actually sharpen it on cardboard. I do that when I'm taking a blade into the backcountry and I want a really lightweight means by which to sharpen my blade. I'll just take a piece of cardboard, put it in a Ziploc bag, and then I've got a great sharpener there. And again, it puts a nice finishing edge on the head. Okay, some other things you can do, and this is a cool one. I really like doing this. This is another great finishing way, kind of like the honing with the leather strop, is using this is sandpaper, okay, and this is like, you can use like 1100 or 1200 grit wet dry sandpaper, and you put it on something super flat. I like to use glass. You can use a casserole dish like this, or you can use like a glass table, or you can even use a shelf from your refrigerator and just lay it out, lay it flat. You want it super flat. And then you take a broadhead, like say if I'm using one of these 3 blades like this, and you do it the same way you did on the stone. Okay, you just go like this, and again, I do like 10, 10, 10, 10, 9, 9, 9, 9, and keep doing that. Now, if you want to get even extra cool with it, it's wet dry, you put a little water on it, and I find that the water on it, it works even better, okay? So it's wet dry paper, and there's something about the water that just, I can really get a super fine edge on it. So I like to go backwards on this so I don't cut into the paper. But you can do that with any of these heads. It works the best with a 3 blade like that because you can just lay it flat. But you can do it with any of them. It's just, you got to be able to get in there and get the right angle. Another thing that you can use, say you're out in the field or you're at camp and you go, man, I don't have anything to sharpen. Well, if you got a coffee mug, and one of my friends, Jonathan Compton, taught me this lesson. It's really a cool one. He got a coffee mug that has a rough bottom. If it's painted on the bottom, it's not going to be as effective. But you can take that ceramic and you can literally sharpen your broadhead. You can do it on the edge like that. You just get the right bevel. Again, you can use a Sharpie or you just guess. And you do it the same way. It has just enough friction to actually do really well. And if you're out in the field and you don't have that, you can use a stone. With mechanicals, I usually use like a Lansky, like a pull through. It's really simple. And you just pull it through like that. And again, the same number on both sides. When I'm sharpening the tooth of the arrow, this single piece construction 4-blade head, it's basically like doing a 3-blade head, although you can't lay it flat, okay? You don't want to do that. You'll just dull the blades if you lay it flat. The angle's not correct. So you can use any sort of a flat stone. I like to use a thin one to be able to get in there. And what you do is you just basically lay that flat stone across the blade, and then you just stroke. And you try to keep the same angle and follow the initial bevel as best you can. And you just stroke on that blade, and then you do the same thing on the other side. And you do the same thing on all the blades. You can also use the DMT here in the same way. It fits in there. You just get it lined up right, and then you just stroke it down. And you can look at it, and if you've marked on it with your Sharpie, you can see that you're getting the right angle. And you just stroke it down until you get it really sharp. So you do that just like you would any of the other heads. So I hope all this is helpful. We owe it to the animals we hunt to harvest them in as lethal and ethical of a manner as possible. And toward that end, sharpness matters. So remember the 2 main things we've talked about, the retained edge. Select a head, purchase a head that gives you the best edge retention properties possible within your price range. And then initial edge. Use some of these sharpening techniques to bring that head to its sharpest edge possible. Good luck.